Hello everyone, welcome back. Expenditure method or precautions of expenditure method के बाद, now in this lecture we will discuss some numerical questions of the expenditure method. Before starting the numerical of expenditure method, एक बार हम उसके सारे constituents revise कर लें so that it will be easy for us to solve the numerical. Fine. So in the expenditure method, we have three constituents. First constituent is the final consumption expenditure. First constituent था हमारा final consumption expenditure और जैसा कि लिखा हुआ है final consumption expenditure means consumption of final goods and services, ठीक है ना. और इसके अंदर दो आते हैं, final consumption expenditure by government sector जिसको हम बोलते हैं government final consumption expenditure, and B consumption expenditure by household sector. This is called private final consumption expenditure. जो final consumption expenditure private sector household sector करता है, that comes under the private final consumption expenditure. So these are the two sub-constituents of the final consumption expenditure. Fine. This is our number one. Number two is the gross domestic capital formation. Gross domestic capital formation. Word gross is used means it includes the value of depreciation. Depreciation की value include करता है. Fine. और इसमें दो सब constituents हैं, gross domestic fixed capital formation. Fixed capital formation means इसमें जो fixed asset से related जो हमारा investment होता है, whatever investment we are doing in our economy, which is related to the fixed assets, that comes under this gross domestic fixed capital formation. इसमें मैंने आपको बताया भी था, whatever investment firm sector is doing, that also comes under this gross domestic fixed capital formation, plus private residential investment also comes under this heading. Fine. And second is the changes in inventory. Changes in inventory actually represents the inventory investment, and formula for changes in inventory is the closing inventory minus opening inventory. Fine. So these are the two sub-constituents of the gross domestic capital formation. Main heading is gross domestic capital formation, and in this we have two subheadings: gross domestic fixed capital formation, which represents the investment in fixed asset. Fine. And changes in inventory, इसके अंदर changes in inventory आता है. Fine. उसके बाद we have third constituent, that is net exports, and net exports represents the export minus import. और ये मैं आपको बता चुका था कि इसके पीछे रीजन क्या है. एक्सपोर्ट्स में वी हैव एक्सपेंडिचर ऑफ रॉ मटेरियल गुड्स एंड सर्विसेज, रॉ मटेरियल इंटरमीडिएट गुड्स, तो वो बेसिकली हमारा नेट एक्सपोर्ट्स इसके अंदर कंसिडर हो जाता है. तो वी हैव थ्री मेन कंपोनेंट्स इन एक्सपेंडिचर मेथड: फाइनल कंजम्पशन एक्सपेंडिचर, एंड देयर आर टू सब कॉन्स्टिट्यूएंट्स ऑफ दीज, गवर्नमेंट फाइनल कंजम्पशन एज वेल एज द प्राइवेट फाइनल कंजम्पशन एक्सपेंडिचर. एंड ग्रॉस डोमेस्टिक कैपिटल फॉर्मेशन, अगेन वी हैव टू सब कॉन्स्टिट्यूएंट्स: ग्रॉस डोमेस्टिक फिक्स्ड कैपिटल फॉर्मेशन एज वेल एज द चेंजेस इन इन्वेंट्री, और वी कैन से इन्वेंट्री इन्वेस्टमेंट. इसको हम ग्रॉस डोमेस्टिक इन्वेस्टमेंट भी बोल सकते हैं. कैपिटल फॉर्मेशन इज द सिनोनिम फॉर द इन्वेस्टमेंट. फाइन. एंड थर्ड मेन कॉन्स्टिट्यूएंट इज द नेट एक्सपोर्ट्स, द फॉर्मूला फॉर विच इज द एक्सपोर्ट माइनस इंपोर्ट. अब हम इसके वन बाय वन न्यूमेरिकल स्टार्ट करते हैं फ्रॉम द बेसिक्स टू सम एडवांस्ड न्यूमेरिकल. सो आवर फर्स्ट न्यूमेरिकल इज कैलकुलेट नेशनल इनकम और एनएनपी एट एफसी by expenditure method from the following informations. First information is final consumption expenditure. Final consumption expenditure is given. Nothing is mentioned that it is a private or government final consumption, so we will consider that it includes both government final consumption expenditure as well as the private final consumption expenditure. Okay, next is gross domestic capital formation. Heading itself is given, so it is assumed that both gross domestic fixed capital formation as well as the inventory investment both are included in it. और अगर वो separately भी given होगा तो we will ignore that point. Third is the net exports. After that, consumption of fixed capital. Consumption of fixed capital is a terminology which is used for depreciation. Depreciation का synonym है. Net factor income from abroad and net indirect taxes. Okay, fine. So first, our first A is the final consumption expenditure. First heading is the final consumption expenditure, and final consumption expenditure is given rupees 5,600 crores. This is the amount in crores. Fine. ये amount है and this is our net amount, 5,600 crores. Fine. Now, B is the gross domestic capital formation. Gross domestic capital formation directly given. This is our main heading. That is 6,500 crores. 6,500. And C, अब इसके जो सब constituents है वो mention करने की requirement भी नहीं, actually given भी नहीं है question में. C is the net exports. Net exports means already export minus import is given. That is rupees 1,200 crores negative. Negative means now import is greater than export. Fine. Now total of all these three constituent will be the domestic GDP at MP, market price, GDP at market price, GDP at MP. After adding all these value, we have a resultant value of 10,900, which is our GDP at MP, GDP at market price. Fine, but we have to calculate the NNP at FC, means हमें G से N पर आना है, तो we have to deduct less what? Depreciation. Depreciation is given rupees, consumption of fixed capital 560. We have to deduct it. And DP say from domestic product we have to come to the national product, so we will add what? Net factor income from abroad, NFIA, which is rupees 800. Fine. And then from MP we have to come to the FC, so we will deduct net indirect taxes. Net indirect taxes is rupees 350. So final resultant value will be 560 plus 800 minus 350 will be 10790. This is our NNP at FC, or we can say the national income. Second question is calculate GDP at MP. We have to calculate the GDP only, gross domestic product at market price. And informations are given: private final consumption expenditure, government final consumption expenditure, gross fixed capital formation, changes in inventory, imports and exports are given. So चलिए start करें. So we have to calculate calculation of GDP at MP, particulars, amount in crores and net amount in crores. First, our first constituent is A constituent, final consumption expenditure. Final consumption expenditure, and in this we have two sub-constituent. First is the consumption expenditure of private sector, that is household, and the second is the consumption expenditure of the government sector. So number one, private final consumption expenditure. Private final consumption expenditure is 1,200. We are writing it in the amount column. Number two, government final consumption expenditure. So government final consumption expenditure is rupees 200. So total is 1,400. 1,400 is our final consumption expenditure. Iski total main heading. Now we have B, second, gross domestic capital formation. Gross domestic capital formation mein we have number one, gross domestic fixed investment or fixed capital formation, whatever. Gross domestic fixed investment is gross fixed capital formation is rupees 300. Fine. And number two is the changes in inventory, increase in inventory or decrease in inventory, whatever. And in changes in inventory, directly given है, that is 400. So total of gross domestic capital formation is 700 crores. Fine. Now our C is the net exports. Net exports का formula है export minus import. So export is rupees 600 crores and import is rupees 500 crores. So the resultant value is 100 crores. Final resultant value after adding all these values is rupees 2,200 crore, which is our GDP at MP, gross domestic product at market price. Next question is calculate GNP at FC. Now we have to calculate the national gross national income at factor cost. Informations are net domestic fixed capital formation, closing inventory, government final consumption expenditure, net indirect taxes, opening stock, consumption of fixed capital, net exports, private final consumption expenditure, imports, and net factor income from abroad. Calculation of GNP at FC, particular sum on net amount. Our A is final consumption expenditure. Okay, in this we have government final consumption expenditure 200, government final consumption expenditure 200, and number 2 is the private final consumption expenditure of 1500, private final consumption expenditure of 1500. In all, total 1700 is the value of final consumption expenditure. Now, B constituent is the gross domestic capital formation. Fine. In this number 1 we have gross domestic fixed capital formation, fixed investment. ठीक है, gross domestic in this net domestic fixed capital formation is given and we have gross domestic means net is given means already depreciation is deducted. So first we have to add the depreciation. तो इसके अंदर net domestic fixed investment is given which is rupees 350. So we will add depreciation in this to make it the gross value. So depreciation is rupees 50 rupees. So it will be 400. 400 is the value of gross domestic fixed capital formation. Number 2 is the changes in inventory. And changes in inventory represents the closing inventory minus opening inventory. Closing stock is 100 and opening stock is rupees 60. So it will be 100 minus 60, that is 40. So total amount is 440. Fine. And now C point is the net exports. And in exports, we have export minus import, X minus M. Export is rupee, net exports. अच्छा listen, इस क्वेश्चन में we have a net exports of -10 and import is already also given. So जब हमारे पास net exports है तो हम इसको लिख सकते हैं -10. तो if net export is -10 and we have a import of rupees 20, it means export is rupees 10. ये ऐसे ही होगा ना, 10 minus 20 will be the -10. हमें नेट वैल्यू भी गिवन है और इंपोर्ट्स की वैल्यू भी गिवन है, तो या तो हम इंपोर्ट की वैल्यू को इग्नोर करते हैं या उस इंपोर्ट और नेट एक्सपोर्ट से एक्सपोर्ट्स की वैल्यू भी फाइंड आउट कर सकते हैं. फाइन. नाउ वी विल हैव जीडीपी एट एमपी. 2130 इज द वैल्यू ऑफ जीडीपी एट एमपी, बट वी हैव टू कैलकुलेट जीएनपी एट एफसी. ग्रॉस तो एज इट इज ही रहेगा. वी जस्ट एड नेट फैक्टर इनकम फ्रॉम अब्रॉड. And net factor income from abroad is negative 30 crores. And FC, this is MP. So we will less net indirect taxes. Net indirect taxes is rupees 40. So 40, sorry, it will be deducted. Final resultant value is -70. It is 2060 GNP at FC, ग्रॉस नेशनल प्रोडक्ट एट फैक्टर कॉस्ट. एक इसमें आपको बता दूं, जैसे अगर यहां पर हम नेट डोमेस्टिक फिक्स्ड इन्वेस्टमेंट गिवन था 350 और अगर हम इसको डायरेक्टली नेट ले लेते तो हियर द रिजल्टेंट वैल्यू विल बी द एनडीपी एट एमपी. फिर वो नेट डोमेस्टिक प्रोडक्ट आ जाती. अगर हम इसमें डेप्रिसिएशन ऐड नहीं करते तो यहाँ पर जो वैल्यू आती जीडीपी एट एमपी की बजाय एनडीपी एट एमपी आ जाती. बट हमने उसको डायरेक्टली यहाँ ग्रॉस बनाने के लिए डेप्रिसिएशन ऐड कर दिया, तो सो इट बिकम्स ग्रॉस डोमेस्टिक प्रोडक्ट. तो ये तो सिंपल सा फंडा है कि अगर हम ऊपर डोमेस्टिक प्रोडक्ट ऐड इन केस अगर हम इसको डेप्रिसिएशन ऐड नहीं करते, इसको नेट वैल्यू रहने देते, तो यहाँ पर वैल्यू क्या आ जाती, एनडीपी एट एमपी. नेक्स्ट क्वेश्चन इज Calculate GNP at market prices and NNP at factor cost using expenditure method. Private final consumption expend, private fixed investment gross, changes in inventory, government consumption expend, government fixed investment, consumption of private fixed capital, consumption of government fixed capital means depreciation of both the sectors are given separately. Ultimately, total depreciation we will consider. Indirect taxes, economic subsidies, net exports, net factor income from abroad. ठीक है, we have to calculate GNP at MP and NNP at FC. ठीक, fine. Calculation of GNP at MP and NNP at FC. Our first A point is final consumption expenditure. In this we have number 1, private final consumption expenditure. Private final consumption expenditure is rupees 1000. And number 2, government final consumption expenditure. Government final consumption expenditure is rupees 300. Total amount is 1300. B, gross domestic capital formation. In this, first we have gross domestic fixed capital formation. Fine. Now, in this gross domestic fixed capital formation, we have a government fixed investment as well as the private fixed investment. We will consider both. तो इसमें private fixed investment as well as the government fixed investment. अच्छा, nothing is given, so we will consider it as the gross values. हाँ, gross और net कुछ mention नहीं है. Private fixed investment is rupees 500 and gross is already given in that. And government fixed investment के साथ nothing is mentioned that it is a gross value or the net value. तो कुछ भी mention नहीं है, तो हम उसको भी gross assume कर लें. Fine. तो government fixed investment is rupees 200. It means gross domestic fixed capital formation is 700. Number 2 is the value of changes in inventory. Changes in inventory is rupees already given 400. Total is rupees 1100. 1100 is the amount of gross domestic capital formation. C point is the net exports. Net exports is already given rupees 100. 2500 is the amount of GDP at MP. But we have to calculate GNP at MP. GNP at MP. G से G पर no change. DP से NP पर we have to add what? NFIA. And NFIA is given 50 rupees negative. So we will deduct. So 2450 is the amount of GNP at MP. Now we have to calculate NNP at FC. We will deduct less what? Depreciation. And depreciation of both the sectors are given. Consumption of private capital 100 and government fixed capital is 50. 100 plus 50 is the value 150. And less what? Net indirect taxes. And net indirect taxes is 200 and economic subsidies 150. So it will be 200 minus 150, that is 50 rupees. So NNP at FC will be 2250. This is our national income. So these are some basic numerical of expenditure method. और इसके जो बड़े न्यूमेरिकल्स है कॉम्प्रिहेंसिव दैट वी विल डिस्कस इन द लेक्चर ऑफ कॉम्प्रिहेंसिव क्वेश्चन, जिसमें मिक्स्ड क्वेश्चंस आते हैं एंड वी हैव टू कैलकुलेट द नेशनल इनकम बाय यूजिंग एक्सपेंडिचर इनकम एंड वैल्यूएटेड मेथड. फाइन. सो इसके अंदर ही हमने कुछ बेसिक न्यूमेरिकल डिस्कस किए. आई होप आपको क्लियर होंगे. इन केस यू फाइंड एनी डाउट और एनी क्वेरी यू कैन आस्क इन द कमेंट सेक्शन, और जितनी जल्दी होगा आई विल ट्राई टू रिजॉल्व दोज क्वेरीज. थैंक यू. थैंक्स अ लॉट.